What's happening, everybody? Ryan Thomas here, live on the Thomas Takes Sports podcast. Once again, another edition of the TTSP, and this edition is under unprecedented circumstances. Unprecedented circumstances, something that has not happened in my lifetime, 27 years, something that has not happened in my parents' lifetimes of 54 years, and something that has not happened in my grandparents' lifetime, in particular my grandma's lifetime at 84 years. A worldwide pandemic known as the coronavirus, COVID-19, in medical scientific terms, whatever you want to call it. I'm not a doctor and would never claim to be. I would never pretend to be. Not that I pretend to be anything, but especially I wouldn't pretend to be a doctor. And, over the last, I guess you could say, week and a half, things have been very, very, for the lack of a better term, interesting, to say the least, over the course of these last few days, especially wondering whether you're going to wake up every morning on the weekdays and go to your job or not, wondering what you're going to do, wondering what your situation will be, contacting, bosses, employers, employees, fellow coworkers. Everybody has been in this position throughout the entire country, throughout the entire United States, and throughout the entire world. As this is a worldwide pandemic that we're currently living in, and forcing ourselves to be quarantined, forcing ourselves to be sequestered for who knows how long. There is no timetable. Ideally, there is an amount of time where political leaders, governors, the president have laid out the groundwork as far as how long do they expect this to actually last. And within that, we have seen a transformation in the wide world of sports, where one sport, the NBA, they say, hey, we're postponing. The NHL says, hey, we're postponing. Major League Baseball says, hey, we're postponing. The XFL, their season was canceled. And out of anything, I would honestly say as a sports fan, it was pretty sad to see the XFL cancel. The XFL 2020 season, the first season since 2001, the first season in over 20 years, or in 20 years-ish, where you have a league that is coming about, and you're establishing some stars. Philip Walker, one of those stars. Jordan Ta'amu, one of those stars. Cardale Jones, one of those stars. And this league is forced to be canceled. I actually felt pretty bad for that fact, for the fact that Oliver Luck had to really close up shop and say, hey, see you next year, hopefully. I would like to think that the XFL will make another comeback and that the XFL will see another season, if you will. But one league, one brand, one entity in sports has said, no, we're not shutting it down. We might postpone some events, we might cancel some events, but for particular fights, the fans need to see these fights. And that, of course, is the UFC, the Ultimate Fighting Championship. And Dana White has had plenty of media interviews throughout his time, thousands, millions of interviews throughout his time as the UFC president. But I think now more than ever, Dana White has been putting his face out there to the media, letting the people know that enough is enough, that they are going to put the fights on that the fans want to see and when they want to see them, no matter what. And while some find that to be admirable, others out there that are not the biggest fans of the UFC or even the biggest fans of Dana White have said, this isn't right. Dana White shouldn't be putting fights on amid this pandemic where we are literally being told not to be in crowds of over 10 people. We are told to not go anywhere, essentially, where there could be more than 10 people in a store at a time or more than 10 people at the barbershop at a time. And essentially, as the weeks have gone on, restaurants, bars, and anything non-essential has closed its doors, has been told to close up shop and come back another day when this is all over. And yet the UFC has said, we will still put events on. We will close our doors to the venue. No fans will be in attendance, but a small, minuscule, essential group will be there, featuring Dana White, featuring Mick Maynard, featuring Sean Shelby, and the broadcasters. That's really about it, and the referees. I noticed at the last event that was done by the UFC on ESPN Plus was Kevin Lee and Charles Oliveira, the main event. Their corners were smaller than normal. Not as many cornermen, not as many trainers, not as many team members of a fight team that would essentially be there at any fight if this was any other circumstance. But this is not any other circumstance. This is a rare time. And when putting this podcast together, trying to come up with the redeemable title that would fit it, I came to the realization that the only fitting title for this podcast is Coronavirus versus the UFC versus sports. Because while the coronavirus has tried to attack every sport, the UFC has fought back against the sports that have not fought back against the coronavirus, meanwhile fighting against the coronavirus. It is a triple threat match, if you will, the likes of which nobody ever expected, and the likes of which Dana White has completely embraced and has gone out on the media airwaves and has gone out and said, we will continue to put fights on. We will continue to put events on. And in particular, this could not come at a more crucial time for not just the sports world, but for the UFC in particular. You have a fight that fight fans like myself, hardcore fight fans like myself, people that cover the sport like myself, would go as far to say that this fight has been a fight that I've wanted for the last 4 or 5 years. And that is Khabib Nurmagomedov and Tony Ferguson. Now, MMAJunkie.com came out with a report today that Dana White, the UFC president, does want this fight to happen. Not only does he want this fight to happen, but he essentially teased a location for Khabib and Tony and confirmed that the event would be, as I mentioned, a closed-door event. Quote, I do know where it is, White said on Instagram Live, but I'm not ready to tell you yet. I know lots of things. There's not going to be any fans there. It's going to be a closed event. And the article goes on to say that White has been bold in his assertion that despite any hiccups, UFC business will press on. He's promised that his organization will be the first sport to get back into full swing, but that attitude has been met with some criticism. And I think that this might end up going down in history as one of the shining moments in the career of Dana White. And also one of the moments where people will always criticize him. White is not forcing anyone to, quote-unquote, walk down this road. And I admire that. I admire that greatly. I admire the, fortitude or dignity that Dana White has kind of shown to go against the grain and say, hey, we're going to do this event a different way. We're going to go about our business a different way than any other league. And when you design a multi-million-dollar facility in the UFC Apex, now I don't know if this is where the Khabib-Tony fight will be held, but I throw that suggestion out there only because of my point that I'm about to make right now. The UFC Apex, a massive addition to the company. The UFC Apex, a big addition to the UFC, a big addition to MMA, and a venue that really is the hub of the UFC. The UFC doesn't have to do a whole lot in terms of technology at that venue. It's all there, everything at their fingertips. Dana White can literally watch fights from around the globe there without actually being at the event. He can be as close to the event as he would be sitting octagon side from the UFC Apex in the control room, if you will. So when I look at this and I say, how can I really be offended by it when I am a super fight fan and I need to see this fight between Tony and Khabib, and Dana White goes out there and he says, yeah, we'll make that happen. We'll put that together. Quote, everybody who is going to be involved in this thing is going to be because they want to be, not because they have to be or they have to do anything. Believe me, we didn't just start thinking about safety when the coronavirus popped up. Health and safety, these are things that normal businesses that are out there right now don't necessarily have to think about on a daily basis. That are normal. Wait, let me read that again. Health and safety, these are things that normal businesses that are out there right now don't necessarily have to think about on a daily basis. Healthy and safety is something we've been doing long before the coronavirus. We'll be doing it long after the coronavirus is gone. This is just normal blank bleep for us. So to Dana White, this is just another day at the office. And maybe Dana is not bluffing when he says that. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't just another day at the office. Maybe it is. Maybe Dana White is bluffing. Maybe he is saying that, one thing while doing another. I don't think so, though. If there's one thing that I know, is that in scenarios like this where Dana White has the opportunity to quote-unquote puff his chest, stick his chest out at everybody else, he will do it. And many people disagree with him in most instances such as these, where Dana puffs his chest out towards everybody else. But in this instance, I admire it. You have Roger Goodell, who is looking over his shoulder at the coronavirus. He is fearful that the coronavirus will linger until August, September, and the NFL season will be delayed. The NFL would lose millions and millions and millions of dollars, potentially billions and billions of dollars, if that happens. The NBA, I'm sure, has lost millions and billions of dollars. The major leagues, Major League Baseball, has probably lost a lot of money off of this. This is a situation that we have never seen before. And some of the leagues were forced to turn, to not essentially turn a blind eye, but turn towards it and say, okay, we're going to let this put a stop to things. The NBA in particular, you had multiple players that tested positive, so they didn't have a choice. The NHL started to see trickle-down effects of players testing positive, and then Major League Baseball had to follow suit within those two leagues. And the UFC, you have fighters that are in a controlled environment, so it's a little bit different. You're not working amongst a team of players. You're working amongst a team of fighters. And if you can control the quote-unquote training camp and make the training camp more fighter-trainer rather than fighter versus fighter in sparring and training, then you're at an advantage. And that is an advantage that fight sports actually has over some of these major sports in the world today. Let's take, for example, Kevin Lee. I'm sure during Kevin Lee's lead up to his camp, they decided, hey, we're going to have you train with Firas Zahabi and really train with Firas only. He's going to put you through drills that will prepare you for this fight. He's going to study your upcoming opponent, Charles Oliveira, with you. But in terms of interacting with other fighters to the tune that you are, I guess I could say, accustomed to, that's not going to happen. We're not going to do that. We're going to put you in a controlled environment, train your ass off, and hope that, that's the best performance, that will lead to the best performance. And I think that's the case with pretty much every fighter. As a matter of fact, Javier Mendez, the head coach and head trainer at American Kickboxing Academy, which is the gym of world-renowned fighters like Daniel Cormier and Khabib Nurmagomedov, he came out and said, yeah, right now, the only gym that is the only fighter that's allowed in the gym, period, to train is Khabib. All the other fighters are sent home. We have a world title fight in our hands with an undefeated fighter. We are not going to put him in a position to get sick or to get hurt. And I'm paraphrasing that part, but that is essentially what I think Javier Mendez would have said if he was allowed to kind of expand on that statement. Really, the quote was, the only fighter in the training gym is Khabib Nurmagomedov right now. But if I were to add to that quote, I would say we have a world title fight on our hands, 28-0, wants to be 30-0 and retire, or 31-0 and retire, whatever it is. We have the biggest fight of our lives against the toughest opponent that Khabib has ever faced in Tony Ferguson, and I truly believe that. The toughest opponent that Khabib has ever faced is Tony Ferguson. You have to train accordingly. You have to prepare accordingly. And I think that that is something that gives the UFC such a massive leg up on pretty much any other sport. Now, my future hopes is that this virus does not affect future sports. I know it's going to affect baseball. I know it's going to affect the NBA, and I'm certain that it's going to affect the NHL. It already has. But in terms of the NFL, I really hope that this virus is eradicated, is destroyed, is completely gone by, let's just say, June or July, or at the very latest August. What's very unfortunate for people like myself is that I'm a born and raised Western New Yorker. I am a Buffalo born and bred guy. And I have battled through the harsh winter of Buffalo, New York a time or two in my life. Was this winter harsh? No, it was not. It was actually one of the more mild winters that we have had in Buffalo, New York. But it was cold. It was windy. And battling I don't want to leave my house because the weather is bad, but I got to go to the store and pick up some stuff is one thing. But when the sun is out, the sun is shining, and it is hot outside, and you want to be outside swimming with your friends, you want to go to parties, you want to go to cookouts, you want to do things that you are accustomed to doing in the summertime, and you can't because you are told that you cannot go outside because there's a virus out there. We don't know what it is. We don't know how to treat it. We don't even know who has it. Would you want to leave your house? No. So the one thing that has always kept me busy in times of stress, in times of adversity, in times of thought is sports. One thing that has helped me just in every facet of life is sports, whether it was when I was playing sports or whether it's been behind the mic these last 4 years on the Thomas Tick Sports Podcast or any other show that I've been a part of, is sports. And when you take those things away, all you got are Netflix movies, Hulu shows, Netflix shows, and that's about it. And that can get pretty depressing after a while. So I definitely think that the UFC is doing something really right in this case. If you have the ability to put the fight on and take the proper precautions and keep the product going and keep the train moving, keep the boat on the waters, don't wreck the boat, and don't rock the boat, wreck it, rock it, whatever, you do it. You do it. Because for me, the biggest victory in my day today, outside of any of the content that I recorded today, which will be released shortly, is the fact that this fight is carrying on. Is the fact that Khabib and Tony will take place April 18th. Do I give a damn if these guys fought in my own backyard? Do I care where they fight or how they fight? No. The only thing I care about is that they do fight and that the fight fans get the fight that they've been waiting for a very long time. And this goes without even trying to predict what would happen in this fight, trying to dive into what could happen in this fight, trying to analyze the storylines going into this fight. This is the story. This is bigger than any fight. The fact that the UFC is actually going toe-to-toe with the coronavirus and with the people that are willing to criticize them for doing so. I'm Ryan Thomas. That was the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Take care. Also, to end the show, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at Ryan Thomas Take, as well on Instagram at Ryan Thomas Take, for all things sports, for all things MMA, you name it. Would love to hear some reactions from you, the fight fans out there. Once again, take care, stay safe out there, and everybody, let's keep each other in our thoughts and prayers. We're going through a lot right now, all of us collectively, no matter what age you are, no matter where you're from, no matter what part of the world you're in right now. This is tough. We got to get through it. We got to get through it.